Q&A&Critique number 56. It is currently 2000 UTC or local time 1500. And we're here again with another Let's Be for Artists edition as a live stream digital art questions and answer event. So if you're here in the socials, welcome. Thanks for joining. And today we have a very special guest, Sam Krug. So how are you, Sam Krug? Hello.
I'm doing all right.
Good.
Yeah, I just moved into college dorm, so it's been a bit chaotic, but I am happy to be here. I'm fired up. I've got some good stuff for today.
Excellent. Yes, you're quite a protege from what I've seen, and you've been running a community here in Discord for quite some time. You also have a very strong Patreon and YouTube activity. And I've also reviewed one of your pieces of art in one of the Q&As a while back.
Yep.
So another thing that I've known you for is your extra terra type of art, which is the cover art of today. We have a large planet space view with an atmosphere and everything. And here on your YouTube channel, you have been showcasing a little bit about your terrains, some black holes, asteroids, and other space bodies. So I wanted to ask you, so where did you begin? How did you get into this? And what do you do exactly? Do you have more to say?
So I've been, we can start like all the way from the beginning or like sort of like an abridged version. But basically, I've been into space since I was a toddler. And basically, I've only recently gotten to the digital art sphere, at least recently, actually not really recently, a couple years ago, but my love of space has transcended that. But I got into digital art, specifically Blender, actually for making trees. But I eventually got into space stuff and found that I was pretty good at making planets and other bodies like planets. So today I will be sort of showing basically how I make some of the planets, like what some of the techniques are. This is going to be a very node-heavy sort of thing. So, I mean, I guess prepare yourselves.
I am ready.
You are ready?
Well, soon. I still have a couple more questions for you.
Yeah.
So what do you currently do at the moment?
So right now, I am mainly, I've had a very long-term project, which is this planet stuff. But I've been doing stuff like black holes, galaxies. Those were a while ago. Recently as well, I've been working with some hard surface stuff briefly. And also I've been doing some realistic landscape tests. Not many, but I did have a few that were pretty cool. So yeah. That is sort of where I've been, what I've been doing.
Excellent. Nice. So with your hard surface work that you've been working on lately, and also with these clouds and things, do you have a particular ambition with your art? Where would you like to take it?
So right now, I foresee it being mostly a hobby in the future. I do think I'm pretty good at it, and I do think I can earn some money for it, but right now I am studying physics in college with the intent to make that an integral part of my career. So maybe it'll resurface sometime later. Maybe I will end up doing some like VFX stuff or, I don't know, like some space agency somewhere. Probably not, but I'm going to keep my options open.
That sounds good. I have met an artist who works in a NASA agency. It's a lot of motion graphics work, though.
Yeah, man. It's pretty crazy sometimes.
Yeah. Okay, so what is the groundwork? You said you mentioned you started working with trees and then you started getting into the nodes. How did you find the knack for working out these planets and atmospheres and clouds and things like this?
Well, so I started where most Blender users started, which is basic stuff. Surface sphere, cloud sphere with a cloud texture on it with some opacity mask and then like an atmosphere that was volumetric. Pretty basic stuff. Stuff you could find 5-minute YouTube tutorials on. And then I eventually got a bit more advanced with this sort of thing. And by the way, like this is kind of documented through my tutorials on YouTube. So I'm gonna share my screen real quickly so we can sort of walk through this.
That'll be good.
By the way, I'm actually seeing the YouTube stream on my recommended feed, which is kind of funny.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Let me grab a screen share.
Sure.
I'll
Yeah,
share my
I've been going through your Artstation at the moment, enjoying these frames in full screen.
Yeah.
You really have a knack for capturing the detail in the clouds.
Yeah, well, that's like the main difference between what I do and what most of the other Blender people do. So on my YouTube channel, you go to videos. I don't actually have too many videos, but you can see like the first tutorial I made was this, which at the time was already pretty good for what was out there in Blender. But if we like full screen it and stuff, you can see there are quite a few problems. These clouds were just a flat plane that was displaced.
Sorry, I'm still loading
yeah,
your stream. Here we go. Now I can see.
You can see it. Sorry. So this is just a frame from my tutorial. These clouds look pretty good for the time and for like general stuff that like the Blender community was doing at that time. There wasn't many like volumetric clouds, so this was one of the better ways I think that was presented. Nowadays, it's painfully obsolete, and there are loads of issues with it. But it did look pretty decent at the time. I believe you guys can be the judge of that.
It does
So
work.
this was the first. Yeah, this was the first way that I figured out how to do it. First way that I actually publicized, and a lot of people have seen that, and a lot of people have enjoyed it. So I've heard. But it was kind of a god awful tutorial. This was the next plant tutorial I made, which was even worse, but the result was a bit better and it was a lot faster. It's like a 3-minute tutorial. Let me see if I can find the full, like a frame of, okay. Like this was the result. So the clouds are volumetric. This wasn't really, this wasn't done very often in Blender. I learned a trick for increasing the volume detail by a guy in, dude, I'm sorry, I forget his name. It was in the Sci-Fi Meshes server, which is another Discord server I'm on. He made a little trick for making some very detailed clouds. So I kind of applied that here. But this was something that not many people were working with, so I was pretty happy that I was able to figure a lot of this stuff out and make a tutorial about it. A lot of people have enjoyed that tutorial, even if many found it painfully chaotic.
That happens sometimes.
You could see the comments didn't exactly enjoy it. Anyways, this was the second one. I took a hiatus from making planet tutorials, but I did make some this very, very long one, which is probably, I'm going to say it's likely the most detailed one on YouTube. I haven't seen one that is more detailed. This goes into more about creating like actual
realistic atmosphere shaders.
Yeah, and all that stuff.
So with this atmosphere, are you able to zoom into a ground level and still see the atmosphere or close to the sphere with the camera? Is this
yes?
Good? Wow.
You can do that in. I really should share some of my tests, or I should have documented some of my tests with the current atmosphere shader and current planet shader, because you'll be able to get realistic skies from the ground level, which is quite ridiculous, to be honest. But yeah, so this was the first time I think anybody really on YouTube has done the has documented the ways that I now use for creating like these realistic planets, which is manually marching the light rays, manually computing the optical depth calculation, which is essentially just the lighting information. And you're able to get far more detail far faster with that. And I'll go a bit into more detail about the specific techniques I use there.
Yes, it sounds exciting.
Yeah, it's a bit complicated. This tutorial here is 3 hours long. I think I did a decent job of explaining it, but it's something that it's a rather common topic in like general 3D rendering discussions, like render engine development, but it's not something the Blender community or many like VFX communities really touch on because it's such a niche thing.
It is very niche.
Yeah,
but I can see it being useful for a number of different specialized shots. So, for example, the black hole, the sun, the clouds, how to properly shader your clouds. All of these are super useful for many different things, especially with sci-fi.
Yeah. Alrighty.
So, before you begin explaining your techniques, what are the fundamentals that you need to cover to start building a shader like this?
I will get to that in a second. I'm sorry. I've got to take a quick second to set up some stuff because I realized that I forgot to do something rather important.
That's
so,
okay.
But I'll do my best to like sort of commentate and ask or answer questions while I load in these textures. Would you mind repeating that? I'm sorry.
All right. So if you could boil it down to some fundamentals, let's say if you have 3 fundamentals, 3 pillars. These 3 pillars or these 3 fundamental techniques, what are they that you need to master to start creating these planets?
Okay. Well, I'd say first of all, you need to find proper textures. So sourcing textures, that's probably the most important one because you can get surprisingly far even if you have a basic setup if you have good textures. So that's the first thing. The second thing is you know how Blender volumetrics work. So
Yes.
you don't need to go a full like manually tracing out the light rays and all that stuff that I'm doing, but you do need to know the basics and you do need to know how to optimize these reasonably efficiently or else you're going to have 50-hour render times, which is completely undesirable for a number of reasons. Blender's volumetric engine is just not great, so that's kind of a limitation just in general. But yeah, it's something we got to work with.
That's right.
And thirdly, if you aren't willing to like learn all the math for this sort of thing, I'd recommend checking out Terra. Terra has some free trials. Omag, who was going to be here until he got a schedule conflict or something. He uses Terragen. He also makes incredibly realistic planet renders. That is a software that is designed for this sort of thing. So you will find far more resources within the software for that.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So, just a side plug, in B4Artist we did up the EV samples for volumetrics by 2, and we also have 1 pixel sampling of the actual volumes.
Yeah.
So Blender caps at 256 samples, we cap at 512, and the shadow samples in Blender caps at 128, and B4Artist caps at 256. And Blender also has a 2 pixel detail in their volumes, but Cycles works with 1 pixel detail, so Eevee also now works with 1 pixel detail with B4Artists. So if you do want to experiment with that, you can get a bit more detail there.
Yeah. Well, yeah, for sure. I know B4Artists has done some quite impressive things. Also, by the way, I will plug them as well. I don't personally use it because I like Blender's GUI quite a bit, and it's just sort of what I've always used. But for sure, if you find Blender confusingly designed, like that this is something for you.
Man, this black hole's incredible. All right, so
Thanks, man.
The first pillar is good textures. Second pillar is optimized volumetrics. And what was the third one?
So the third one is find a render engine or build your own that works well with high detailed volumetrics. So that means don't use cycles or find a way to
Make it
math
work.
cycles. Yeah. Find a way to math cycles into your bending to your width.
So pick your tools wisely, I guess you could say.
Yeah. I'm sorry if that wasn't super eloquent, but that's sort of the best I got here.
Oh, that's why we have the Q&A.
Yeah.
Hey, this shot has an actual ship in here. A really small little detail right here.
Yep. This was a little fun little compositional test. Those VDBs were done in Embergem. Some basic fire VDBs. I thought they looked pretty good. That black hole is surprisingly old, but it also holds up surprisingly well. So
it holds up very well.
Mm-hmm. So, are you guys interested in getting a bit into the nitty-gritty details of this?
Yes, let's go.
Oh, please.
Let's go. I have everything set up. I'm sorry I took a few minutes to do that. I forgot to load in textures after I downloaded the file from my drive. But are we seeing it?
Let me just see where's your screen?
I'm not sharing. I believe I am.
Hang on. Maybe I'm not watching. Oh yeah, you're disconnected for a moment. Let me watch again.
All right, are we all good?
Yep, I can see you now.
Okay, cool. So there's a couple different things that are going on here. So I'm expecting most of this community is interested in the technical aspect of it. By the way, Dre's or somebody, I am hearing a bit of echoing. If you wouldn't mind turning me down a bit.
Okay, that's probably me.
Yeah. Okay, I think we're good. Sorry, I'm really not this sort of thing. So there's the artistic side, which is how we actually get these sort of realistic clouds. That is where stuff like sourcing textures comes in, and this is something that OMAG generally talks a lot about when he's making a new planet. Because, by the way, OMAG is like the master of finding good textures for this sort of thing. But I will do my best to sort of summarize where we get them from. So there's this site called Earth Explorer, USGS. Blender's being kind of wacky, and I forgot to close the render view. So, and
USGS.
but basically, yeah. So basically, what you can do here is this is a satellite data like hub, essentially, and this is where we find our clouds. Simply because it has the highest quality, and you can find pretty much any type of cloud you want. Let me just sort of show you guys how it works. This is something I covered in a tutorial as well, by the way, but I will do a brief synopsis here. So what you can do is you can, under the search criteria thing here, you can select this circle and 2 points, and then go into data sets, find a data set that works. I use Landsat collection 2 level 1 and Landsat 8, 9, and then go to results to see your images. And you can show these. And these are like super high res, like each one of these is like 10K, super detailed. You can see why we choose these because they're far better than like Blue Marble maps. I believe, yeah, we can go even more detailed. I think that's about it. Yeah.
This is an incredible resource.
Yeah, for sure. That's why we use it. There's a bunch of other ways you can get like cloud data and stuff. Landsat is probably the most reliable. It's the most reliable we've found for sure. But the limitation of this is it's called Landsat. So it will only capture regions that are close to land. So unfortunately, all this lovely real estate is not really available to us. And the reason why we don't want it around land is because look at this. If we want a cloud map and we get this interference from the land, it's going to be kind of weird. Meanwhile, oceans are like very monochromatic, and there's a little bit of glare, but it's generally easy to mask out. So you can download these maps. You gotta like log in. But I'm not going to go through the whole process of it, but it's pretty intuitive. Band 8 is when you download this, you go to product options, and then band 8, the one that's like over like the most has the most mags in it. All right, this one you see it's like 4 times this. This is the panchromatic one, so it's the most detailed. So you download a couple of these, and what we do is we stitch them together because these are relatively small areas. You can see, so we'll take a section that's like roughly the size of like
size of Iceland, maybe.
No,
Larger?
a lot bigger. We generally use
Quebec?
yeah, sort of like Quebec almost, maybe a little bit smaller, just so that we can get yeah, something like that, just so that we can get like a good like scale for this, because clouds have a certain scale, and yeah. By the way, our composites are like 50K to like 100K. Like this one's like 40K because I reduced it a bit because Blender was struggling with it. But all of these are like super detailed. You can go in as far as you want. That's about how detailed it gets. You can see like individual cloud puffs, right? This one also happens to be seamless. But yeah, so that's most of the work that goes into like the actual artistic stuff. And then I've got this whole planet system that makes it really simple to like put input cloud layers. So each of these is a cloud layer. There's some node stuff going on inside here, but this is pretty self-explanatory. This cloud height texture just determines like how thick the cloud is. This is how dense the cloud is. You could choose like edge darkening, all that stuff. It's pretty neat. But the real magic is like, this isn't super revolutionary. You can make this in like 15 minutes if you wanted to. By the way, this is an anisotropy computation. So this is basically, this will compute because certain volumes have anisotropy and clouds do as well.
That's true.
Yeah, so this will basically just turn this volume from a regular volume where light is diffracted equally into an anisotropic volume where light scatters determined based on a certain anisotropy. The reason why I can't do this just with like a general like volume scattering node is because there is no volume scattering here. That's the beauty of this. So
wait. Let me just clarify. So you're taking a really large texture or tiles of texture, and then you're using a photo image editor to stitch and make a tileable cloud texture using the satellite data. You create quite large images. I have a question for that. It's like, what software do you use to stitch such large frames?
I recently got Photoshop. I've been using GIMP for a while. Generally speaking, I do the stitching in like Photoshop, and then I wrote a little jiggy in Blender that makes stuff seamless. So I generally use that if I want to make something seamless. But yeah.
And what is this seamless technique that you do? Is this render on a plane or in the compositor?
Yeah, just render it on a plane. You can mess with some like vector math and stuff to make any texture you want seamless.
I'd like to learn that one day.
I actually have on my tutorial here. Let's go back. There's a link. I'll put it in the. Let's see. I'll just grab the link.
Oh, you have a blend file that provides it. That's very cool. Nice,
yeah, I'll put it in Q&A&Critique for those of you guys that see it.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you guys can analyze it and scrutinize it all you want.
Okay, so after you've got the textures, you made them seamless, you stitch them together, they're extremely large, they preserve the raster detail. Yes. Then from there you start to layer your cloud pieces together using anisotropy and other techniques to bring out a fake volume for performance reasons.
Well, this is basic. This isn't actually the volumetric computation yet. This is just part of it. It's a little augmentation. So you'll see there's actually two colors out here. Color out 1, color out 2. There's also 2 inputs there. Basically, what these are, they're made so that they're incredibly modular. So you can just string these guys together, and you'll see here, like all these are doing is they're just adding these things together, just updating the inputs by whatever is computed in here. And that way, each of these work additively. But yeah, so anisotropy is computed in here, and one of these color outputs, I believe it's color out 1. This is the output with anisotropy. Color out 2 is the output without anisotropy. I have this because certain things are not anisotropic in volumes, namely indirect light scattering. So if I want to have accurate like bounce lighting for volumes, it can't be anisotropic because that's just not really how it works, except in like really extreme scenarios. Well, technically, people that work in optics are going to ridicule me for that. Technically, yes, anisotropy is still a thing, but it's pretty similar for the most part. Anisotropy or no, like the method you get there is a bit different, but it looks the same, with the exception of the direct light being a little bit different. So basically, the thing about this is then sort of the revolutionary thing, I think. Well, it's not extremely revolutionary. Both me and Nugget and JC with his atmosphere do this is not computing the volume light with the volumetric effect with an actual volume scattering node. Instead, it's emission and absorption.
Wow, so this would make it 10-fold times more efficient concerning
Yes.
its rendering.
Yeah, and also far more detailed. Like we're talking like 100 times more detailed, and I'll get to how that works in a second, but it's quite crazy.
Okay.
By the way, I'm gonna try and only spend like 5 or 10 more minutes on this. I've got something to do at around 4:50ish, so I want to open time for like general questions.
Excellent.
Sorry if I'm going a bit over. So basically, what you're gonna see here is that there's a couple structural components that are made so that this entire thing can work properly. And the real thing that clues it in that it isn't scattering based is that there is an emission and an absorption here, and there is no volume scattering node. And so there's two different things. There's I'm just going to go through the cloud layer. There's an atmosphere object, which is pretty much the same thing, except it's a little bit different. It's have different detail levels. I don't need to have the same detail, volumetric detail for the atmosphere as for the clouds. So this is just a huge optimization. And it also makes the shaders a bit simpler. But basically, what it boils down to here is I take a cloud composition, which is what you just saw. This is all the stacked up cloud layers. And I'm multiplying them by a lighting computation, which is mostly done in here. But a little bit is done here with this quick augmentation. This stuff right here, you'll see this is the indirect light output for the clouds, and this is the direct light output for the clouds. So this stuff is done. Most of the lighting is done here, and we'll open up this one in a second. But we're multiplying the color output of the cloud by the lighting info, which is again done in here. And by the way, if you want some, if you're interested in seeing what this looks like without the clouds, without any ambient light or bounce light, we can turn that off.
Will it take a while to recompile?
No, it's pretty quick.
Oh, it is pretty quick.
It's quite dark.
I understand.
This shows how necessary that is. I know Nugget implemented this a similar way in his GeoSim one.
Yes, GeoSim is an excellent add-on I have seen.
Yep.
Actually, this
all
is a
right.
common theme. We had JC talk with us maybe last week, I think it was. And as far as I know, Nugget is also a protege. He is still in college also. You are also in college. You guys
Bro,
are
he's like in high school. He's like 15.
high school, yes.
Yeah.
So he's a protege, you are a protege. All three of you have worked with atmospheres and clouds. This is something, it blows my mind, to be honest.
I'm trying to keep this as general as possible, but also sort of go into what makes my stuff a bit different than theirs. Well, we all have the differences, right? And we're all aiming for different things. His is aiming for speed, mine is aiming for accuracy. JC is kind of doing a both mix of those, I believe. I think he's still working just on atmosphere and getting that down. I'm not entirely sure where that's gone in recent time, but yeah. So, anyways, let's get into lighting computations and what makes this extra special with the sort of Sam sauce, as I call it.
Yeah. Do you mind full screening your editor by pressing Control Space?
Yes, I will do that.
There you go.
Okay. I keep forgetting I have a wide monitor, so sometime I'll try to zoom in. Anyways, so this is a pretty standard setup for a volume lighting computation. So a bunch of this just is simplified down to just like no jargon, I guess. This is where the actual light samples come in. I have this bit, which is just a little bit of an optimization bit that essentially makes it so that I don't need to include extra samples to get good detail on the ground. Because my method, unfortunately, it's very when like you'll get cloud shadows on like the ocean and stuff, but sometimes they get very noisy with how I do it. So this just helps a bit with that. But basically, this is where all this stuff goes in. It's unfortunately not going to be very easy to understand if you don't have a rather solid understanding of how volume light samples are computed. But essentially, the sort of Cliff Notes version of it is what you do is you multiply the like output of this sort of cloud composition thing, or just your volumetric material. You're going to have like a density and color sort of attribute to that, right? And you're going to multiply that by a light, a volume light calculation. How we compute that light is we start at where, like if we're sampling from a certain point, we start at that point, we find an exit point that is this, by the way. This is essentially just, this gives us the information where the light ray leaves the atmosphere and just goes off into space where we don't need to compute it. So we find so that's the exit point. And then what we do is we sample a certain amount of points in between those 2 points, the area where we're sampling from and the exit point. So that's what these are. Each of these is a sample at a certain point. And we take this position in, which is where we are sampling from. It's this. And then we march it by this step vector, which is essentially the exit vector, the exit point minus the step, the initial position, the point that we're sampling from. And what we do is we do some computations here, which determine how far we're stepping. And then we essentially add our step vector or a portion of it to our initial position. That becomes the position out in here, which is essentially just an updated position. And we do that for a certain amount of time or a certain amount of iterations. In this case, there are 6 plus 1 additional over here. This is a bit complicated. I don't really want to get into that.
That's okay.
But what makes it special is, generally speaking, these light computations are done linearly. And what that means is you can take a certain point, you find your exit point, like all that stuff. We're doing the same thing there. You find your exit point, you march the ray to there, but each step carries the same weight and each step is the same distance. So essentially, if we're taking 6 volume steps, the first step, we're going to be marching a sixth of the way to the exit point, right? Second step, we're going to also be marching a sixth of the way to the exit point. And we get there in 6 steps because each step is a sixth. We're going a sixth of that position, or a sixth of that. We're going a sixth of that distance, right?
Okay, so I have a comment or remark to that concept. So this is essentially you are recreating ray marching and recreating your own rays within the shader.
Correct.
This is incredible.
It's actually, I don't want to like downplay it, but it's actually pretty standard among node gurus. A lot of people know how to do this now. It's certainly really well understood by devs that do this stuff every day. But I want to get into the sort of thing that makes this ridiculous, right? So you'll see if we go, hopefully, oh shoot, I gotta update shaders and stuff again.
This guy's a recompiles.
Yeah. Well, here, I'm just gonna. Let me find the plan. So you'll see in here though that there's a lot of detail on this stuff. Like there, you can see this cloud, like it's shaded properly, even though it's a very small cloud when it comes to like planetary scales, right? And I did all this lighting in 6 light steps. So the question presents itself: how did I do that? And this is where I think I am the most diverse when it comes. This is like the sort of thing that I guess pioneered in Blender shading, is this adaptive light step approach. So basically what I'm doing is I'm running this on sort of a polynomial function. So instead of like just doing it linearly where each step is the same value, I'm doing it quadratically or cubically. So I'll open Desmos and I'll sort of show you what I mean. So if I go into like X to the N.
X to the
right?
N, okay.
And let's say I've got 5 light samples, right? That way we can sort of illustrate it on here, the way the grid lines match up. So this is what like a normal light sampling profile looks like. We're going from 0 to 1, and each step, keep them. So if this is like a graph of distances over steps, right? So actually, you know what, let's just go. Each unit will. No, never mind. I'm making this too complicated. So we're going from 0 to 1. This is our exit point. This is our entry point. This is the point we're sampling from. So what I figured out was that so long as you get from 0 to 1 in no matter how, but this point 0 0, this point 1 1, they have to be the same. They can't change. But what you do inside of here can change. So if this y-axis is like the distance that we're sampling from, or like we're sampling like a quarter of the way through a volume, like at this point, right? What you can do is you can change this ever so slightly. So because these 2 points remain the exact same, right?
Correct.
But our first sample, you can see, now we're only sampling like a 20th or a 25th of the way from our initial point to the exit point, right?
Okay.
And we can like really exaggerate it. Like I am doing this with n equals 6. So you can see, like we can zoom in here. Like this is like at 0.2, which is like if we're doing 5 samples, I'm doing 6 samples. But if we're doing 0.2, like the proximity of this is insane. It's like 0.0001 away. So we can get detail. We can step through these clouds multiple times while still exiting the atmosphere at an appropriate level, right? So we can get all these tiny, tiny details and yet still shade this stuff properly, right?
Okay, I
And
think I
so
understand. Nice.
I'll explain it more if it needs to be explained.
That's clear. So my next question is, as a practical application, you're using this for planetary clouds and atmospheres. Will this technique also work for closer scale medium shots of an aircraft going through the clouds or other aspects
Yes,
of larger
and
volumes?
I wish I had some of my tests of that stuff, but you can get this sort of thing to look pretty much realistic from like actually the surface, which is something that I thought was quite insane. It takes a while to render, of course, because like you're from the surface and it has more detail and stuff, but it will work. And it does take a bit of finagling to get the clouds to look right, but like it has the capability, which I thought was pretty cool.
It's so
It's very-
cinematic.
Thanks. Yeah, I rendered this in 8K. I think it looks pretty solid.
Yes, it's good for zooming in.
Mm-hmm. Shoot, it's getting pretty late. I think I can answer a couple questions, but I've got to go in a couple minutes, so I'm going to turn it over to you guys. Yeah.
How long did this 8K render take using your setup?
This one took about 50 minutes.
That's it?
Yeah. So you'll notice like this shit's pretty noiseless. Like the atmosphere only needs like 2 samples. The clouds need a little bit more. Yeah, that's the beauty of it. It's far more detailed. It's also far more. It's just far faster. It's also like you're surprised that this taking 50 minutes, but if we were to run this in GeoSim, like it would take like 2 minutes. I had a real-time planet shader a while ago that was sort of like GeoSim. In fact, me and Nugget collaborated a bit on it, and that thing took how long for an 8K? It took like 1 minute for an 8K render.
That's incredible.
Oh my god.
Yeah, it's pretty solid. Blender's render engine is just super slow.
In general, yes.
Yeah, well, I mean, volumetric path tracers that are made for like general purpose volumetric stuff are generally pretty slow.
Mm. So
Yeah, but like
creating your own
again,
custom light rays and paths on your own system of ray matching will only show the bare essentials that you need for the detail that is required. So in this case, you're economizing that regard.
correct. Then you can get like 8K images, and all of this will be still fully detailed and look realistic.
That's right. So White Rooster Productions has mentioned you should share your hardware specs of your PC when talking about render times.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I do have a pretty beefy PC. I've got a 3080 Ti for that I'm rendering on. But I have done similar things on like a lower grade graphics cards and stuff, and it does only like you can scale it based on that. Fact of the matter is, if I were to do this the regular way with all the volume steps and stuff with general Blender render questions, or what am I saying? General Blender render volumetrics. It'd take like 50 hours to get anything close to this, so it's a great improvement regardless.
An incredible improvement, yes. 500% almost.
This a little bit back up. I want to see if I can show you just the detail. Like, keep in mind, we're using 50K textures, and at the end of the day, the thing that's going to get compromised first is the textures, not the shading. So here, I'm zooming in as close as I can. You can see it still shades pretty well.
It's very, very nice.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. All right, I think I've got time. Trace, I'm sorry, we didn't get to the Patreon thing today. I spent a bit too much time explaining But I'll answer a few more questions, but I gotta leave here in like 5 minutes.
Okay, so Geep has a question for you. He asks, if you use a higher res texture, would you need to increase the increment steps of your subsamples of the light?
No. So this will work with like procedurals for like, by the way, like if you want to make good plants, half of these clouds that you'll see are procedural, right? Like look at that one. That's not a texture. That's procedural noise. You can see it's not a texture because it like caves in on itself. It's not just 2D. So this is independent of the textures. So the volumetric rendering engine will work pretty much regardless of it'll what am I trying to say? The textures do not extend beyond like the textures. It won't require more detail or less detail to sample with a texture regardless of detail.
Okay.
Does that answer it?
I think it does. Amazing work. Thank you, he says. I also say the same. Before you go, I just wanted to ask all these materials, if you want to have access to your types of projects or your things like that, we touched on the topic that we were going to talk about Patreon for a time. But if someone wanted to get access to your tutorial material, other things, where can they?
So yeah, Patreon is where I upload a lot of this stuff. I also just upload a bunch of free stuff just in general on my server. There is more stuff on Patreon, of course, because I do want to serve my patrons, even though I've been pretty bad at that recently. I'm sorry if anybody here is a patron. Sam, I think you're a patron. Sorry you are getting too much stuff.
Indeed, it's a marvelous patron. Definitely worth the money.
Well, that was an unintended plug, but thank you.
Well, this is where we're doing.
So I mean, I didn't come here just to advertise and stuff, but
that's
yes,
okay.
That is where I put stuff. Generally speaking, my Discord server has a bunch of resources on it. I've got an entire channel dedicated to me and other people who just want to upload some resources. I think my old black hole files are on there. I haven't really looked at it in a little while, but there is some stuff there.
Excellent.
Generally speaking,
share the link.
Yeah. Generally speaking, on Patreon, like the tier description describes it all. $5 will get you like tutorial files and stuff. $10 is just tutorial files, obviously, plus extra stuff like my old planet shader that was pretty much real time. That was on the $10 tier. I believe I upload some cloud maps, cloud composites there on the $10 tier as well, although those might be on the $5 tier. Anyways, I don't want to talk about my Patreon too much.
Yeah, that's because we can leave that topic for another day, because we were planning to discuss, this is going to be a bit of a cliffhanger, maybe we'll have to cover this topic another day, but we were planning to discuss patronage as an artist, the imposter syndrome to some degree, the concept of being a patron, and how to share that as an artist, because you're quite an inspiration to me myself, actually. You started out quite young.
That.
You remind me a lot of my little brother as well, who may come here and talk as well. He's also has quite a strong following on Patreon. But the concept is very novel, very new. And
well, your brother is a hell of a lot more successful on Patreon than me.
Yeah, he got
I've
lucky.
Just got like
well, a little bit.
Yeah.
But there is a strategy to it, I suppose. But we'll have to talk about this another day.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for joining, Sam, and also the 3 pillars of getting your textures right, and making sure you have a good source texture as a basis, and then getting your materials to have an optimized volumetrics or some hacks and tricks to create your own ray matching. If you have that sorted to calculate your light well, then you'll be able to have better render times. And on top of that, working on knowing your engine and the limits of it and working around it. So understanding your tools. So those 3 pillars makes you
very well put.
a very excellent atmosphere shader system and a very excellent resource to get started.
Thank you guys for listening. I appreciate the attention and the receptiveness to some of the craziness. I'm going to have to leave here in a minute, but I want to say thank you guys.
Thank you. Hopefully we can have you again for later. Maybe we can continue our
Yeah.
conversation about Patreon another time. And I can't wait to see
For
what is
sure.
your next piece. If you do have a couple of seconds more, what is your next piece? What are you going to work on?
So for the foreseeable future, I'm going to be doing more planet stuff. But I have been experimenting with applying some of the techniques I've used for planets onto stuff like black holes, which is quite interesting. And I also just want to make sort of like general like node packs and stuff, because I haven't found many good ones that aren't like vector math, or not vector math, vector displacement centric for like November and stuff, but just like some procedural noise sorts of things that are a bit less intuitive, and just some general tools, intersection functions, that sort of thing.
All right. It's an open book. It's excellent.
Yeah. I know.
Okay.
Anyways, thank you for having me on.
Cool.
I'm gonna dip out. I'll see you guys later.
See you later. Right. For those of you who are still here, I just wanted to say thanks for joining and hanging out. As always, I guess we can finish this a little bit early, but if you would like to have your art showcased, looked at, and also praised here live, feel free to leave your art in the Q&A and critique chat. And if you'd also like to be a special guest and line up for the queue, there is a possibility that I could host you on and we can talk about you, your art, ask you some questions, open up to the community a little, and get you out there. Another thing as well is I wanted to say thank you for the Beef Artist community for having me host these here. And as always, I will be continuing these sessions every Friday at 2000 UTC, or every Friday afternoon in my local time. So thanks. If you like these episodes, don't forget to subscribe or give a little like or a comment, take part, open up your mic when you want to. And if you like what these artists do, throw them a bone. Patronage goes a long way. I'm also on Patreon as well. Whatever is shared helps us share more. So thank you again. And White Rooster has another question actually before I hang up. Are these sessions recorded and streamed somewhere? They are. If you go to my channel, Andre Stevens on the internet, on YouTube, sorry, you should be able to find me there. Let me just pull me up. As it in. Give me a second. You can also visit my links of my channel on tunermedia.com. As you can see here in the channel, it's currently running live. I have been doing these sessions for a while now. This is season number 2 and chapter 56. There's a lot of content, a lot of excellent artists. Today we mentioned JC. JC was our guest star from last week, and he talked about his vector displacement, his trajectory, what inspired him to work, and also how he has been getting into nodes as well. So we've been having a lot of good fun with node work over the past couple of weeks. Next week we will have another surprise special guest and also other topics hopefully coming on shortly. So thanks again. And with that, I guess I will stop the stream. I will see you guys